A millionaire father and his daughter encountered a woman rummaging through trash on Christmas. What she revealed about her past changed their lives forever in a shocking way. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe, leave your like, and comment where you are watching from. Chapter 1. The Christmas Encounter. The December sun of 2024 slowly descended over Fifth Avenue, painting the decorated storefronts with golden hues. David Johnson walked with measured steps along the sidewalks of Central Park, his 7-year-old daughter Lily skipping beside him, fascinated by the shiny ornaments adorning each establishment. The 42-year-old businessman maintained his characteristic posture, shoulders back, impeccable navy blue suit from Brooks Brothers, gleaming Italian shoes, and a facial expression that blended determination with a subtle melancholy that only those who knew him intimately could perceive. "Daddy, look at that giant tree!" Lily pointed excitedly at a 5-meter-tall pine adorned with golden lights at the entrance of a department store. Her brown curls danced under a red velvet hat, and her green eyes sparkled with the typical innocence of her age. She wore a baby pink wool coat and held tightly onto her favorite doll, an American Girl doll with blonde hair in a blue dress she had received for her last birthday. "It is beautiful, Princess," David replied with a half-smile, discreetly checking the Rolex on his wrist. "But we can't be late. Our reservation at the restaurant is at 7:30. For 3 years, since he lost Sarah in a car accident on the Hudson River, David had shaped his life around precise routines. It was his way of maintaining control over a world that had become too unpredictable. CEO of Johnson Realty, one of the largest luxury residential real estate companies in New York, he controlled a real estate empire valued at over $200 million. Every decision was calculated, every move planned, every emotion carefully guarded to avoid showing vulnerability in front of partners, or especially in front of Lily. "Daddy, can I stop over there?" Lily tugged at her father's coat sleeve, pointing to a small plaza where some people walked among trees illuminated by vintage street lamps. David followed his daughter's gaze and frowned. "Lily, we've talked about this. That place isn't safe for children." But Lily had already released his hand and was running toward the plaza, her laughter echoing in the cool night air of New York. David sighed heavily and followed her, his footsteps echoing on the cobblestones. It was then that they both spotted the woman. She was kneeling near a trash bin, carefully sorting recyclable materials into different plastic bags. She appeared to be around 40, with brown hair tied in a simple bun, a delicate face despite signs of fatigue. She wore a navy thermal shirt, faded but clean jeans, and white sneakers that had seen better days. Even in the simplicity of her attire, there was something in her posture that conveyed dignity. Her straight back, precise movements, and the careful way she folded each piece of paper before putting it away. And she was humming. "Good Jesus was born in Florida. Oh, 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 what a cold night." Her voice was soft, melodic, echoing gently amidst the city's noise. "Shepherds came from afar. Oh, 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 to worship the child." Lily stopped abruptly, mesmerized by the song. David, who had caught up with his daughter, felt something strange stir in his chest. That tune. Sarah used to sing it during the Christmas preparations. "What a beautiful song," Lily whispered, slowly approaching the woman. The stranger looked up. Her eyes were brown, deep, with small wrinkles at the corners that betrayed someone who smiled often. When she saw the girl, her face lit up with genuine joy. "Hi there, little one. Do you like this song? It's quite old. My grandma taught me when I was your age." David stepped forward, instinctively protective. "Lily, we need to go. We shouldn't bother her." The woman looked up, meeting his gaze. For a moment, there was an awkward silence. David noticed that she did not look away, did not show shame or subservience as he would have expected. There was something in that gaze that unsettled him, a sharp intelligence, an inner strength that contrasted with her apparent circumstances. "There's no problem at all," she said, addressing David first before turning her attention back to Lily. "What's your name, dear?" "Lily, and this is my daddy, David." The girl proudly pointed to her father. "We are going out to dinner to celebrate that there are only 3 days until Santa Claus arrives." The woman smiled, and David realized it was a genuine smile, devoid of the artificiality he was used to seeing at social events in his class. "How exciting! My name is Emma. It's a pleasure to meet you." Lily looked at the doll in her hands, then at Emma, and back at the doll. Her green eyes filled with determination, an expression David recognized immediately, as she had inherited that stubbornness from Sarah. "Emma, would you like my doll? She is very pretty and can keep you company." "Lily!" David exclaimed, horrified. "You can't just give your toys to strangers." But Lily had already extended the doll to Emma, who accepted it with trembling hands. David saw tears welling up in the woman's eyes. "Dear, that is very generous, but I can't accept it. This doll is yours. It must hold a lot of sentimental value." "It does," Lily agreed seriously. "That's why I want you to have it. My mommy always said that the best gifts come from the heart." David felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Those were exactly the words Sarah used. Emma held the doll against her chest and closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, she was clearly emotional. "Your mother was a very wise woman, and you, little Lily, have a giant heart." She looked at David. "Sir," David was speechless. At that moment, observing the interaction between his daughter and that stranger, he realized something he hadn't noticed in a long time. Lily was truly happy. Not the superficial happiness she showed when receiving expensive gifts or when they went to fancy places, but a deep, authentic joy. He began, but didn't know what to say. "Daddy, Emma knows so many songs. Can she teach me more?" David looked at Emma, who awaited his response with moderate expectation, clearly prepared for a refusal. But there was something about that moment. Perhaps it was Christmas Eve, perhaps it was the memory of Sarah echoing in Lily's words, or perhaps it was simply the exhaustion of maintaining such rigid control over everything that made him hesitate to say no. We need to go have dinner," he finally said, his voice less firm than usual. "Of course," Emma replied, gracefully standing up. "Thank you for the wonderful gift, Lily. I will take very good care of your doll." As they walked away, David heard Lily whisper, "Daddy, Emma is different." "What do you mean, Princess?" "She has the same smile as Mommy." David stopped walking and looked back. Emma had resumed her work, but now she hummed a different, more cheerful melody. Lily's doll was carefully positioned in a separate bag, protected from the recyclables. For the first time in 3 years, David Johnson felt that something had changed, and he didn't know whether that scared him or relieved him. Continue Chapter 2. Unexpected Revelations. 2 weeks had passed since the meeting in the square, but David couldn't get Emma out of his mind. During board meetings at Johnson Realty, while reviewing architectural plans or discussing profit margins with his partners, the image of that woman humming among the recyclables kept returning. There was something about her that intrigued him, a contradiction between her apparent situation and the eloquent way she spoke, her dignified posture even in difficult circumstances. Lily, for her part, had become even more insistent on their outings around the area. Every afternoon when David picked her up at St. Benedict's School, one of the most prestigious educational institutions in New York, she would ask to take a stroll through Central Park before heading home. David had given in a few times, always remaining vigilant and secretly hoping to catch a glimpse of Emma again. On a rainy Thursday in January, as they crossed the same square under a black Italian umbrella, Lily suddenly exclaimed, "Daddy, look! It's Emma!" David followed his daughter's gaze and saw her sitting on a bench under an awning, organizing papers in a seemingly patched folder. Even with the light rain dampening her hair, she maintained the same upright posture as before. This time, she wore a slightly yellowed white dress shirt, a navy pencil skirt that had seen better days, and carried a brown, synthetic leather bag. "Emma!" Lily waved enthusiastically, pulling her father toward the bench. Emma looked up from her papers, and her face lit up upon recognizing them. "Lily! What a joy to see you again!" Then she turned to David with a respectful nod. "Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson." "Good afternoon," he replied, noticing for the first time that she spoke with perfect diction, without a strong accent or popular slang. "How have you been?" "Well, thank you for asking. And you? How were your holiday celebrations?" Lily let go of her father's hand and approached the bench. "They were nice, but I missed your music. Can you sing that song again?" Emma smiled, but David noticed a shadow of melancholy in her eyes. "Of course, dear. But first tell me, how was your Christmas? Did you like your gifts?" "I got a lot of toys, but the best gift was seeing you take such good care of my American Girl doll." Lily pointed to Emma's folder, where David could see the doll carefully wrapped in a clean cloth. "Are you taking her out?" Emma laughed, a musical sound that echoed even amid the rain. "In a way, yes. She accompanies me when I go to work." David frowned. There was something in the way she said work that didn't align with what he had witnessed weeks earlier. "Emma," he heard himself say before fully processing the thought, "do you have a few minutes? There's a coffee shop right around the corner. We could talk while Lily has a hot chocolate." Emma hesitated, looking at her simple clothes and then at David's obviously expensive suit. "I don't know if—" "Please," Lily interrupted, bouncing, "I really want to hear more about you." 15 minutes later, the three were sitting at a discreet table in Café Central, an upscale establishment known for serving New York's elite. David had chosen that place instinctively, but now regretted it as he noticed how Emma discreetly observed the surroundings, clearly out of her current element. "This place is beautiful," she commented, admiring the crystal chandeliers and the walls lined with fine wood. "It reminds me of the cafe at the Culture Bookstore where I used to—" She abruptly cut off her sentence, as if she had revealed more than she intended. "Where you used to what?" David asked gently. Emma took a sip of the coffee she had ordered, plain, without sugar, and took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, it's just that sometimes I forget that my life has changed." Lily, who was enthusiastically attacking her hot chocolate with whipped cream, stopped drinking and looked seriously at Emma. "How has your life changed?" David lightly touched his daughter's arm. "Lily, maybe that's a very personal question." "No, it's okay," Emma said, smiling sadly. "Actually, it's a story that few know completely." She looked directly at David. "I was the educational director at St. Cecilia Academy. I worked there for 15 years. David nearly spilled his coffee cup. St. Cecilia was one of the most respected private schools in New York, known for its academic excellence and tuition fees that cost more. "Was it the minimum monthly salary?" "Was it?" he managed to articulate. "Yes. I have a master's degree in early childhood education from NYU and a specialization in Waldorf education. Throughout my career, I developed social inclusion projects that were recognized by the Department of Education." Emma spoke with restrained pride, but David could sense the pain behind her words. "Until March of last year, I had a life quite different from the one I have now." "What happened?" Lily asked with the innocent curiosity typical of children. Emma looked at the girl, then at David, as if assessing how much she could share. I discovered some irregularities at the school. There was a project for building a new daycare, and I realized that the materials being approved were not suitable for children. They were cheaper, yes, but potentially dangerous. David felt a knot form in his stomach. As a businessman in the construction industry, he knew exactly what she was talking about. When I refused to sign the approval documents and threatened to report the situation to the authorities, the pressure began. First, they tried to convince me with financial incentives. Bribes, David said quietly. Exactly. When that didn't work, they started a smear campaign. They spread rumors about my professional competence, questioned my academic background, and even suggested that I was suffering from psychological issues. Emma's voice trembled slightly. In 6 months, I lost my job, my apartment, my professional reputation, and practically all my friends. Lily had completely stopped drinking her hot chocolate and was looking at Emma with wide eyes. "But you did the right thing. Why did they hurt you for doing the right thing?" Emma smiled sadly and stroked the girl's face. "Sometimes, dear, doing the right thing comes at a very high price, but I don't regret it. I couldn't live with myself knowing that children could get hurt because of my omission." David was silent, processing the information. His analytical mind was already connecting the dots, and a terrible suspicion was beginning to form. "Emma," he said carefully, "which construction company was involved in this project?" She hesitated again, looking directly into his eyes. "Whitestone Consortium. Do you know it?" David's world stopped. Whitestone was one of the subcontractors that his own company had used in various projects over the past 2 years. He himself had signed contracts with them. Yes, I know," he managed to say, his voice coming out rougher than usual. Emma must have noticed something in his expression, because her posture stiffened slightly. "Mr. Johnson, do you work in construction?" Before he could answer, Lily, oblivious to the tension that had settled at the table, exclaimed, "My daddy owns a huge construction company. He builds the most beautiful buildings in New York." Emma visibly paled. For a moment, David saw something that looked like fear pass through her eyes, quickly replaced by a carefully neutral expression. "I see," she said simply, starting to gather her things. "Well, I think I've taken up enough of your time." "Emma, wait." David stood up as she did. "It's not what you think." "And what do I think, Mr. Johnson?" The formality had returned to her voice, creating a distance that hadn't existed minutes before. "Daddy, why is Emma sad again?" Lily asked, confused by the sudden change in the mood of the conversation. David looked at his daughter, then at Emma, who was waiting for his response with an expression that mixed resignation and challenge. In that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. "Emma, I need to investigate this story. If my company had any involvement in this situation, I will find out. And if I discover that we were complicit in something that harmed you or put children at risk," he paused, carefully choosing his words, "I will fix it." Emma studied him for a long moment. "Why? Why would that matter to a man like you?" David looked at Lily, who was holding Emma's hand and watching them with expectation. "Because my daughter is right. You did the right thing, and maybe it's time for me to start doing the same." Chapter 3. Disturbing Discoveries. The following Monday, David arrived earlier than usual at the Johnson Realty office, located on the 38th floor of a commercial building on 5th Avenue. The panoramic view of New York stretched before his floor-to-ceiling windows, but he barely noticed the urban landscape as he powered on his computer with a determination he hadn't felt in years. The office perfectly reflected his personality. Italian-designed furniture in shades of grey and black, a solid mahogany desk with not a single paper out of place, and walls adorned with business certifications and photos of successful projects. It was an environment that exuded power and absolute control, but that morning David felt as if he were losing control of everything. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson," greeted Carla, his executive assistant for 8 years. An efficient 50-year-old woman, always impeccably dressed, who knew every detail of the company's business. "You arrived early today. Can I bring you your coffee?" "Good morning, Carla." "Yes, please. And I need you to bring me all the contracts we signed with Whitestone in the last 3 years. Absolutely all of them." Carla frowned slightly, a rare reaction for someone used to her boss's most unusual requests. "Is there a specific problem, sir? Should I contact legal?" "Not for now, I just need to review some details." 40 minutes later, David was surrounded by piles of documents, contracts, and spreadsheets. His background in business administration from NYU and his 20 years of experience in the New York real estate market had taught him to read between the lines of business agreements. But what he was discovering was making him increasingly nauseous. Whitestone had been contracted by Johnson Realty for 6 different projects in the past 2 years. All involved constructions intended for educational institutions or public facilities, 2 municipal daycare centers, a technical school, a center. David took the phone and dialed Robert Smith, his partner and project director for 15 years. "Robert, I need to talk to you now." "David? Man, it's 8 in the morning. Did something happen?" "Come to my office. We need to discuss the Whitestone." 20 minutes later, Robert entered the room with his usual informality. At 45, he was a robust man, with graying hair and calloused hands that revealed someone who had started his career as a laborer before graduating in civil engineering. He wore jeans, a polo shirt and sneakers, a contrast to the corporate environment, but David had always respected his technical knowledge. "Hey, partner, what's the urgency with the Whitestone?" Robert flopped into the armchair across from David's desk. "Robert, explain something to me. Under what circumstances did we approve the use of alternative materials in educational projects?" Robert shifted slightly, his expression becoming more cautious. "Man, you know how it is. The market is competitive. Clients are always pushing for lower prices. The Whitestone has expertise in finding more economical solutions without compromising quality. Define without compromising quality for me." "David, all materials meet basic technical standards. Everything is within legal limits." "Basic technical standards," David repeated slowly. "Robert, we're talking about schools, places where children spend 8 hours a day." Robert stood up and began pacing the room. "Look, David, since when did you become so sensitive about these issues? We've always focused on profit. That's how you keep a competitive company." David felt a cold anger rising in his chest. "Sensitive? Robert, let me ask you something. Would you put your child in a school built with the materials that the Whitestone uses?" The silence that followed was more eloquent than any answer. "I see you understand my concern," David said coldly. "David, man, you're talking about reviewing contracts that have already been signed, projects that have already been delivered. This could cost millions for the company. And if we don't review them, it could cost children's lives." Robert looked at him as if he were a stranger. "What the hell happened to you? 2 weeks ago you were only worried about the numbers from the last quarter." David thought of Emma, her dignity maintained even in adverse circumstances, of Lily offering her favorite American Girl doll to a stranger. He thought of Sarah and how embarrassed she would be if she knew his company was compromising children's safety for profit. "What happened to me is that I remembered there are things more important than money." Robert let out a humorless laugh. "Jesus, David, are you serious? Because if you are, I need to remind you that we have investors, employees, financial responsibilities. We can't just decide to be nice overnight." At that moment, David's phone rang. It was Emma. "Mr. Johnson, there's a call for you." It's from Emma Santos. She said it's about the issue you were investigating. David felt his heart race. Put her through. Hello? Mr. David, it's Emma. Sorry to bother you, but well, after our conversation, I've been thinking, maybe I can help you with information about the White Stone case. Of course, Emma. Actually, I was just... Mr. David, she interrupted him, urgency in her voice. I've discovered something you need to know. The situation is more serious than I initially told you. David looked at Robert, who was watching him with growing curiosity. Go ahead. Not over the phone. Can we meet? I have documents, photos, evidence that, well, could be important for your investigation. Where are you now? I'm at the public library in the city centre. It's where I spend most of my days since I lost my apartment. David checked his watch. It was 9:15 in the morning. I can be there in 40 minutes. Thank you, Mr. David. See you soon. David hung up the phone and found Robert staring at him with a mix of disbelief and concern. David, don't tell me you're getting personally involved in this story. Who is this Emma Santos? David grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. She's someone who lost everything for refusing to go along with what we're doing, Robert, and maybe she can teach me how to do the right thing. David, Robert called out as he was already at the door, if you go down this path, you'll destroy everything we've built over the last 20 years. David stopped and turned slowly. Robert, over the last 20 years we've built a profitable company, but maybe it's time to build something I can be proud of when I look in the mirror. While waiting for the elevator, David felt for the first time in years that he was making the right decision, even if he didn't know what the consequences would be. His mind was already racing, anticipating the conversation he would have with Emma, the revelations she might make, and most importantly, how he would explain all this to Lily. The elevator arrived, and as the doors closed, David saw the reflection of a man who was about to discover truths that would change his life forever. And for the first time since Sarah's death, that didn't scare him. Continue, Euro 133. Chapter 4. The Truth Revealed. The New York Public Library contrasted sharply with the corporate environment David had left behind. The historic building from the 1940s, with its imposing columns and classical architecture, housed an eclectic mix of college students, researchers, unemployed individuals seeking free courses, and homeless people who found refuge from the harsh streets of the downtown area. David parked his black Tesla Model X in a paid parking lot 3 blocks away, aware that it would be an easy target for muggings in that area. As he walked along the sidewalks crowded with street vendors and homeless people, he nervously adjusted his tie and tried not to show the obvious discomfort of an elite New York executive in unfamiliar territory. He found Emma on the 2nd floor, in the periodicals section, sitting at a worn wooden table surrounded by stacks of newspapers and magazines. She was wearing the same white dress shirt and navy blue skirt as in previous days, but this time David noticed details he had missed. The shirt was carefully ironed, her nails impeccably clean despite the circumstances, and a small gold chain around her neck that suggested it was a family heirloom. "Emma," he greeted her, pulling out a plastic chair to sit beside her. "Mr. David, thank you for coming." She closed the newspaper she was reading. It was the economics section of the New York Times, and turned to face him. "I know you must be wondering why I asked to meet here." David looked around, noticing the tall shelves filled with books, the students focused on their research, the characteristic smell of old paper mixed with the aroma of cheap coffee from the coffee shop downstairs. "To be honest, I've been wondering about a lot of things since our conversation at the coffee shop." Emma smiled sadly. "I can imagine. Finding out that your company may have been involved in questionable practices must be complicated." Emma, before we talk about that, I need to ask you a direct question. Why did you decide to reach out to me? You don't know me. You don't know if you can trust me. Why take that risk? Emma was silent for a moment, nervously fiddling with a brown cardboard folder that was on the table. Because your daughter reminded me of something I had forgotten. Lily. She gave me her favorite doll without expecting anything in return. It was such a pure, genuine gesture. Emma paused, her eyes glistening. It made me remember why I chose to work in early childhood education. It reminded me that there are still good people in the world, and I thought that maybe the father of such a child could also be one of those people. David felt a tightening in his chest. Emma, what did you find out about Whitestone? She opened the folder and pulled out a series of documents organized with colorful clips. David immediately recognized some of the forms. They were technical specifications for construction materials. After we met at the coffee shop, I kept thinking about your expression when I mentioned Whitestone. I realized you knew the company, and that worried me. Emma sorted through a few sheets. So I went back to investigate. I contacted some sources I still have in the educational field and discovered something terrible. She pointed to a detailed spreadsheet. It wasn't just St. Cecilia Academy. Whitestone has contracts with at least 15 educational institutions in Greater New York. And in every case, there is the same pattern. Cheaper materials being approved through financial incentives for those who were supposed to oversee. David studied the documents, his business training allowing him to quickly grasp the implications. My God! Emma, do you have any idea how many children attend these institutions? More than 8,000, between children and teenagers. Her voice trembled. Mr. David, some of these materials are potentially carcinogenic. Others can cause long-term respiratory problems, and there are cases of structures that don't even meet basic fire safety standards. David ran his hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the discovery. And my company, your company, was responsible for overseeing the construction of 6 of these projects. Emma pulled out another set of documents. Rainbow Municipal Daycare in East City, Santos Dumont Technical School in Itaquera, Hope Community Center in Capão Redondo. Stop, David interrupted, recognizing the names. They were all projects he was proud of, works that had been delivered on time and under budget. Emma, those projects were overseen by my partner, Robert Smith. I trusted him to ensure everything was being done correctly. Emma studied him carefully. Mr. David, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Did you really not know any of this, or are you pretending to be surprised to protect yourself? The question hit like a slap. David looked her directly in the eyes. Emma, I swear on the memory of my late wife that I didn't know any of this. Robert always presented me with reports showing that the projects were within technical specifications. Emma nodded slowly. I believe you. Your reaction when I mentioned Whitestone at the coffee shop was too genuine to be an act. What else did you find out? Emma hesitated before responding. Mr. David, there's something I discovered about your wife that you may not know. David felt the world stop around him. Sarah, what does my wife have to do with this? Emma pulled out a series of photographs and documents that David did not recognize. Your wife, Sarah Johnson, volunteered for a social project that served underprivileged children in the East Side, and she secretly funded scholarships for low-income children to study at St. Cecilia Academy. David took the photographs with trembling hands. In one of them, Sarah was smiling beside Emma at what appeared to be a charity event. In another, his wife was distributing school supplies to children in blue uniforms he didn't recognize. Did you know each other? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. We did. We worked together on several educational projects during the last 2 years of her life. Sarah was extraordinary. She had a genuine passion for helping less privileged children. David felt tears welling up in his eyes. Why didn't she ever tell me about this? Emma gently touched his arm. She once told me that you were very focused on business, that she feared you would see her philanthropic activities as sentimental nonsense. Sentimental nonsense, David repeated, recalling the times he had dismissively commented on other businessmen's social projects as mere marketing ploys. Mr. David, there's one more thing that you need to know. Emma pulled a sealed envelope from her folder. Sarah gave me this just before the accident. She said to give it to you if something happened to her. David took the envelope with trembling hands. His name was written in Sarah's delicate handwriting. For David, my love, for when you are ready to meet the woman you truly married. He slowly opened the envelope and took out a 3-page handwritten letter. As he read, Emma watched respectfully in silence. Tears streamed down David's face onto the paper as he discovered a Sarah he had never known. Her dreams of starting an educational foundation, her plans to involve David in social projects when he emotionally matured, her hopes that Lily would grow up understanding the importance of helping the less fortunate. The last line of the letter read, David, I hope one day you discover that true wealth is not in what we accumulate, but in what we give away, and I hope our daughter grows up knowing this. When he finished reading, David was sobbing openly. Emma discreetly offered him a tissue. She was an extraordinary woman, Emma said gently. And I never truly knew her, David replied, his voice breaking. Emma, I need your help. How? David looked at her with determination through his tears. I need to fix this, all of this, the poorly executed projects, the at-risk children, Sarah's memory. But I don't know where to start. Emma smiled for the first time since they had sat down. Mr. David, I know exactly where to start, but first I need to warn you, doing the right thing is going to cost a lot. How much? Perhaps everything you've built in the last 20 years. David thought of Lily, of Sarah, of the doll given without expecting anything in return, of Emma's dignity even in the worst circumstances. Then so be it, he said. It's time to build something worthwhile. Continue 0135, Chapter 5, Confrontations and Decisions. The next morning, David arrived at the office with Sarah's letter and Emma's documents stored in a leather folder he hadn't put down since leaving the library. He had spent the entire night awake, reading and rereading every word his wife had written, every piece of evidence Emma had compiled. When he finally managed to sleep for a few hours, his dreams were filled with images of children in classrooms with peeling walls and unstable structures. Carla greeted him with her usual efficiency, but David noticed the concern in her eyes when she greeted him. Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Robert has already arrived and is waiting for you in the conference room. He seems agitated. Thank you, Carla. And prepare a notice for an extraordinary board meeting today at 3 in the afternoon. Any specific topics for the agenda? David hesitated for a moment. Ethical review of all ongoing contracts with third-party suppliers. Carla blinked several times, clearly surprised by the unusual nature of the request, but she noted everything down professionally. I'll summon the board members. David found Robert in the conference room, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. His partner looked disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, and his red eyes suggested he too had spent a sleepless night. David, I'm glad you're here. Man, we need to urgently talk about this American Stone situation. David sat at the head of the conference table, carefully placing his folder in front of him. I'm listening. Robert stopped pacing and sat heavily in the chair opposite. Look, after you left yesterday, I kept thinking about our conversation, and I thought it best to be completely honest with you. What kind of honesty, Robert? The American stone was not just a cost-saving choice. Robert avoided David's gaze. They offered a more advantageous arrangement for us. David felt his stomach tighten. Define more advantageous arrangement. David, you know how competitive the construction market is in New York. Everyone does it. It's practically impossible to secure public contracts or bids without some adjustments in the processes. Robert, just tell me, did you take bribes from American Stone? The silence that followed was deafening. Robert finally nodded his head, unable to look directly at David. How much? David asked, his voice dangerously low. In the last 2 years, about $3 million. David stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the wooden floor. $3 million. Robert, do you have any idea what that means? We compromised the safety of thousands of children for $3 million. David, calm down. It wasn't exactly like that. The materials still meet minimum standards. Minimum standards, David exploded. Robert, would you put your son Michael in one of those schools? Answer me. Robert finally looked up, and David saw something he had never noticed before. His partner looked like a defeated man, consumed by a guilt he had carried for years. No, Robert admitted quietly. I wouldn't. Then why is it acceptable for other people's children? Robert stood up and began pacing the room again. David, you don't understand. When we started the company, we were just 2 guys trying to survive in a market dominated by traditional families with connections for generations. It was impossible to compete fairly. Impossible. Or inconvenient. Inconvenient then. Is that better? It was more convenient to accept the system as it is than to try to change it, Robert shouted, his frustration finally boiling over. And it worked, David. Look where we are. Look at what we've built. David opened his folder and took out Sarah's letter. You know what else we've built, Robert? A legacy of shame that my daughter will have to carry when she discovers that her father put profit above the safety of innocent children. David, for God's sake, don't be dramatic. No child has been harmed because of our projects. Not yet harmed, David corrected. But what if one day they are? What if there's a fire in one of those schools and the emergency exits don't work properly? And will the structures hold up during an earthquake? Are you going to sleep peacefully knowing we saved a few $1,000s on safety materials? Robert sat down again, running his hands over his face. What do you want me to do, David? Confess everything and destroy 20 years of work? I want us to do the right thing. And what is the right thing, in your opinion? David sat down again and looked directly at Robert. First, we will return every cent we received from Whitestone. Second, we will hire an independent company to inspect all the projects we did with them. Third, where there are safety issues, we will fix them using our own resources. And fourth, we will go to the police and tell them everything. Robert looked at him as if he had lost his sanity. David, you're talking about at least $15 million. And that's not counting lawsuits, the destruction of the company's reputation, prison. Robert, my wife died without me knowing. She dedicated her life to helping underprivileged children. My daughter teaches me lessons in generosity while I build empires on corruption. It's time for me to stop being a coward. Robert fell silent for several minutes, processing David's words. Finally, he spoke with a tired voice. David, I can't do this. I don't have your courage or your clear conscience. What do you mean? If you go down this path, I want to sell my share of the company to you. I can't face the consequences of what we did. David studied the face of the man who had been his partner and friend for 2 decades. He saw not only cowardice, but also a deep exhaustion, as if Robert were weary of carrying the weight of his own decisions. How much do you want for your share? Market value, $25 million. I accept. Robert looked at him in surprise. Just like that, without negotiation. Robert, if I'm going to try to save this company, I need to have total control over it, and I need to work only with people I can trust completely. At that moment, Carla knocked on the door and entered the room. Mr. Johnson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent call for you. It's Emma Santos. She said it's about something that can't wait. David picked up the intercom. Emma. Mr. David, something terrible has happened. Whitestone found out I was investigating again. They sent 2 men to the library this morning. They said if I kept butting in where I'm not wanted, there would be consequences. David felt a cold rage rising in his chest. Where are you now? In a coffee shop near the library. Mr. David, I'm scared. David looked at Robert, who had overheard the conversation and now looked even paler. Emma, do you have a safe place to stay tonight? Not exactly. David made a decision that surprised even himself. Then you will stay in the guest apartment of my condo. No negotiation. Mr. David, I can't accept that. Emma, you risked your life to show me the truth about my company. The least I can do is ensure your safety. When he hung up the phone, Robert was staring at him with an expression that mixed admiration and disbelief. David, are you sure you know what you're doing? David thought of Sarah, of Lily, of Emma collecting recyclables while he accumulated wealth with blood on his hands. Robert, for the first time in 3 years, I know exactly what I'm doing. Continue. Chapter 6. Transformations and Resistances. 3 weeks had passed since Emma moved into the guest apartment of the Maison building, one of the most exclusive residential condos in Central Park. The contrast between her previous life on the streets downtown and the understated luxury of the 2-bedroom apartment overlooking Central Park still made her uncomfortable, but David had insisted she stay there until the situation with Whitestone was resolved. Lily had received the news of Emma's presence in the building with an excitement that David hadn't seen since before Sarah's death. Every afternoon, as soon as she got home from school, the girl would run to Emma's apartment, where they spent hours talking, singing folk songs, and doing homework at a much more relaxed pace than the rigid method David had always imposed. On that rainy Thursday in February, David was in his living room reviewing contracts when he heard Lily's laughter echoing down the hallway. Intrigued, he walked to Emma's apartment and found the door ajar. What he saw made him stop in the doorway. Lily was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by children's books that David didn't recognize, while Emma, sitting on a cushion nearby, read aloud a story about a girl who planted magical trees. Emma's voice had a hypnotic cadence full of theatrical intonations that made Lily laugh and clap. And then, Emma read dramatically, little Maria discovered that the most beautiful trees were those planted with love and care, not those that grew just because they were watered in a hurry. Like our friendship, Lily exclaimed. It grew with love, didn't it, Emma? Emma smiled and stroked the girl's curly hair. Exactly, dear. The best things in life grow slowly, with patience and care. David felt a tightness in his chest. How long had it been since he had seen his daughter so genuinely happy? How long had it been since he himself sat on the floor to read stories with her? Dad! Lily saw him at the door and ran toward him. Come listen to the story. Emma reads much better than Aunt Mary. Mary was the housekeeper David had hired after Sarah's death. A competent 60-year-old woman who took impeccable care of Lily, but whose interactions had always been professional and distant. Emma quickly stood up, showing embarrassment. Mr. Johnson, I'm sorry. Lily insisted that I read to her, but if you... She prefers that she does the lessons. No, David interrupted, surprising himself. Actually, I would like to hear the story too. Can I join you? Lily clapped her hands excitedly while Emma looked at him with a genuinely surprised expression. Of course, she said, resuming her position on the floor. We were at the part where Mary learns that 20 minutes later the three were immersed in reading. David found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't experienced in years, watching how Emma brought the characters to life with her expressive voice, and how Lily reacted to each twist in the story with pure and contagious emotion. When Emma finished reading, Lily stretched like a satisfied cat. "Emma, can you live here forever? That way you can read to me every night." David felt Emma's discomfort even before she spoke. "Lily, dear, you know I'm only here temporarily. Soon I will have my own home again. But why can't you stay? There's plenty of space and Dad has more than enough money." "Lily," David gently intervened, "Emma has her own life and her own plans." Emma looked at him with gratitude, but David noticed something else in her eyes, a sadness she was trying to hide from the child. After Lily went to dinner with Mary, David and Emma were left alone in the living room. She began to pick up the books scattered on the floor, avoiding his gaze. "Emma, can we talk?" She nodded and sat in the armchair across from the sofa where David had settled. "I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for Lily. I haven't seen her so light in weeks." Emma smiled sadly. "She's an extraordinary girl, Mr. David. Intelligent, sensitive, generous. It's a privilege to spend time with her." "Emma, can I ask you a personal question?" She hesitated but nodded. "Do you have children?" The question seemed to hit her like a punch. Emma closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath before answering. "I did," she said simply. David felt he had touched on something very painful. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked." "No, it's fine. It's been a long time since someone asked about that." Emma looked out the window, watching the rain begin to fall. "I had a daughter, Bella. She died at 5, leukemia." David felt the world stop around him. "Emma, I'm so sorry." "It was 8 years ago. One of the reasons I dedicated myself so much to early childhood education after that. Every child I taught, in some way, reminded me of her." Emma discreetly wiped away a tear. "When I lost my job and my stability, I felt like I was losing my connection to Bella as well." David suddenly understood why Emma had connected so easily with Lily, why there was so much genuine tenderness in her interactions with the girl. "Is that why you hesitate when Lily talks about you staying here permanently?" Emma nodded. "I don't want to get too attached and then suffer another loss. And also, well, I don't want Lily to get confused about my role in your lives." At that moment, the intercom in the apartment rang. David answered and heard Mary's voice. "Mr. David, there's a woman here at the front desk asking for Miss Emma. She said her name is Patricia Mendes." David felt the blood run cold in his veins. Patricia was his younger sister, a 40-year-old socialite known for her sharp tongue and well-disguised prejudices under a facade of refined education. "Send her up," he replied, looking worriedly at Emma. "Who is Patricia Mendes?" Emma asked, noticing David's sudden tension. "My sister, and she probably isn't coming in peace." 5 minutes later, Patricia entered Emma's apartment like an elegant hurricane. She wore a light pink Chanel suit, carried a Hermes bag, and her blonde hair was styled in a perfect bun. At 40, she maintained her beauty through expensive cosmetic treatments and an almost military discipline with diets and exercise. "David, dear," she kissed her brother's cheek with calculated coldness before examining Emma from head to toe. "And you must be the ward of my brother." Emma stood up and politely extended her hand. "Emma Santos, nice to meet you." Patricia completely ignored the greeting, addressing David exclusively. "David, we need to talk. In private." "Anything you have to say can be said in front of Emma." Patricia let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, we've reached that point, have we? Well then, I'll be direct." She turned to Emma. dear, I don't know what kind of game you're playing with my brother, but I suggest you stop immediately." "Patricia," David interjected between the two women. "David, have you completely lost your mind? You installed a charity worker in the same building where your daughter lives? Do you know what they're saying about this at the club?" Emma paled but maintained her dignity. "Ms. Patricia, I understand your concern, but I assure you that—" "You can be quiet," Patricia interrupted rudely. "David, this woman is clearly taking advantage of your emotional vulnerability. It's obvious she staged this whole persecution theater to evoke your pity and gain access to your life." David felt a rage he hadn't experienced in years. "Patricia, you will apologize to Emma immediately, or you will leave here now." "Apologize? David, have you completely lost it? This woman is a freeloader who is using you and manipulating Lily to gain access to our family." Emma stepped forward, her voice firm despite the visible emotion. "Miss Patricia, I understand that my presence here may seem inappropriate from your point of view, but I assure you that I've never asked your brother for anything other than the opportunity to help him uncover the truth about his business." "Truth about the business?" Patricia looked from Emma to David. "David, what truth is that?" David realized that the moment had come to confront not only the corruption in his business, but also the deeply ingrained prejudices in his own family. "Patricia," he said, calmly, "sit down because I'm going to tell you a story about integrity, courage, and what it really means to be a decent person." Chapter 7. Family Revelations. The silence that followed David's declaration was broken only by the sound of rain tapping against the apartment windows. Miss Patricia stared at him with a mix of disbelief and growing irritation, while Emma stood, clearly uncomfortable with the family tension unfolding before her. "David," Miss Patricia said slowly, removing her leather gloves and sitting on the sofa, with the studied pose of someone accustomed to commanding difficult social situations. "I sincerely hope you are not about to tell me that you believe the fanciful stories of this woman." David sat in the armchair opposite his sister, gesturing for Emma to sit as well. "Miss Patricia, Helena's fanciful stories are all documented and verifiable. In fact, they revealed something about our company that deeply embarrasses me." "Our company?" Miss Patricia raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "David, you're talking about Johnson Realty as if it were some kind of criminal organization." "Not criminal, Miss Patricia, just ethically compromised." David spent the next 20 minutes detailing everything he had discovered about Whitestone, the substandard materials, the bribes, Robert's involvement, and the potential consequences for thousands of children attending the institutions built by them. As he spoke, he watched Miss Patricia's expression transform from disdain to concern, and finally to something that resembled panic. "David, are you telling me that our family might be involved in a corruption scandal that could end up in the newspapers?" Miss Patricia had completely lost her composure, running her hands nervously through her hair. "Do you have any idea what this could do to our social reputation?" "Miss Patricia, we are talking about children at risk, and you are worried about social reputation." "David!" she exploded. "You may be naive enough not to understand the implications, but I am not. If this story leaks, we will become social pariahs. No one will want to associate with us anymore. Clubs will cancel our memberships, and our friends' children won't be able to play with Lily." Emma, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, finally spoke in a soft but firm voice. "Ms. Patricia, I can understand your concern about the social consequences, but you can't understand anything." Miss Patricia turned to her in fury. "You have no idea how much effort and how many generations it took to build our family's position in New York." "Miss Patricia," David stood up abruptly. "That's enough." "No, David, it's not enough. Do you want to know what my greatest fear is? It's that you are being manipulated by this woman to destroy everything. Our father built. David felt something break inside him. Our father, Ms. Patricia, our father who died of a heart attack at 60 because he was being investigated by the IRS for tax evasion. Is that the legacy you want me to preserve? Ms. Patricia paled. It was the first time in 20 years that David openly mentioned the legal troubles that had haunted their father's last years. David, how can you speak like that about Dad? Because I finally understood that he taught me everything wrong, Ms. Patricia. He taught me that financial success justifies any method, that relationships are transactions, that people like Emma are disposable. David walked to the window, looking at the rain that was now pouring down. You know what scares me the most, Ms. Patricia? It's realizing that I was becoming just like him. Emma discreetly stood up. Maybe I should let you two talk privately. No, David said firmly, not turning from the window. Emma, you stay. This conversation concerns you too. Ms. Patricia watched them with growing frustration. David, you cannot seriously be considering ruining your life over a matter of conscience. David slowly turned to face his sister. Ms. Patricia, do you know how Sarah died? The question caught Ms. Patricia off guard. Of course I do. Car accident on the Hudson River. Do you know where she was going when the accident happened? Ms. Patricia hesitated. No, I never asked for the details. David pulled Sarah's letter from his folder and extended it to his sister. She was coming back from a meeting with directors of public daycare centers in East City. She was trying to implement a preschool program for underprivileged children. Miss Patricia took the letter and read it in silence. David watched her expression gradually change, from impatience to surprise, and finally to something that could be shame. I didn't know, she said quietly when she finished reading. None of us knew, Miss Patricia, because we as a family never cared about anything that didn't generate profit or social status. Emma watched the scene with evident discomfort, clearly not wanting to be present during this intimate moment between the siblings. Ms. Patricia carefully folded the letter and returned it to David. What do you intend to do? First, I will return all the money we received from Whitestone. Second, I will hire independent inspections on all the projects we did with them. Third, I will fix any safety issues using company resources. And fourth, David looked directly at Emma, I will create the educational foundation that Sarah dreamed of. David, Ms. Patricia said slowly, you are talking about tens of millions of dollars. I am talking about doing the right thing. Ms. Patricia remained silent for several minutes, processing everything she had heard. Finally, she stood up and walked over to David. And if I tell you that I disagree with all of this, that I think you are making a mistake that will destroy our family? David looked at her sadly. Then I will have to choose between the family I inherited and the family I want to build for Lily. You are emotionally blackmailing me. No, Ms. Patricia. I am giving you the opportunity to be part of something worthwhile. Emma, who had been listening to the entire conversation in silence, finally spoke up. Mr. David, Ms. Patricia, I apologize for interfering. But perhaps I can help you find a way that doesn't divide the family. Both siblings turned to her. How? Ms. Patricia asked, her initial hostility replaced by cautious curiosity. Emma took a deep breath before responding. Ms. Patricia, I understand your concern about the family reputation, but what if, instead of hiding the mistakes of the past, you turned them into an example of redemption? David frowned. What do you mean? Imagine how society in New York would react if they knew that the Johnson family discovered issues in their own business and voluntarily decided to correct them, investing millions in safety improvements for underprivileged children. Instead of a scandal, you would become an example of social responsibility. Ms. Patricia studied her carefully. Are you suggesting we turn this into a public relations campaign? I'm suggesting that you turn this into an opportunity to build a legacy you can truly be proud of, Emma replied. A legacy that honors Sarah's memory and gives Lily reasons to admire her father. David felt something stir in his chest. For the first time in weeks, he glimpsed a possibility of doing the right thing without completely destroying everything around him. Ms. Patricia remained silent for a long time, clearly considering Emma's proposal. Finally, she sighed deeply. "Emma," she said, her voice losing its previous hostility, "perhaps I judged you too hastily." Emma smiled gently. "Ms. Patricia, we all judge based on our experiences and fears. What matters is being willing to reconsider when presented with new information." David looked at the two women, one representing the privileged world he was born into, the other representing the values he wished to embrace, and realized that perhaps he didn't need to choose between worlds. Perhaps he could build a bridge between them. "So," he said, "let's start planning how to do this right." Continue. 0148. Chapter 8. Crises and Revelations. 2 months had passed since the tense conversation between David, Ms. Patricia, and Emma. March had arrived with the intense heat typical of New York summers, and with it came challenges David hadn't anticipated. He was in his office on Wall Street at 7 in the morning on a Wednesday when Carla rushed in with a look of concern he rarely saw. "Mr. Johnson, we have a serious problem. Mr. Roger Wilson is here and says he needs to speak with you urgently." David felt his stomach tighten. Roger was one of the main investors in Johnson Realty, responsible for about 40% of the company's capital. A 65-year-old man from a traditional New York family, known for his impatience with business sentimentalism. "Send him in, Carla." Roger entered the room like a general prepared for war. Tall, impeccably styled grey hair, a navy blue Armani suit, and a facial expression that promised nothing good. He offered no greetings or courtesy smiles. "David, sit down. We need to talk seriously." David gestured to the armchair in front of his desk. "I'm listening, Roger." "I've been receiving calls from the other investors for 2 weeks. Everyone wants to know why you are wasting $15 million on unnecessary renovations on projects that have already been delivered and approved." David had prepared for this conversation, but he still felt the weight of the confrontation. "Roger, these renovations are not unnecessary. We are correcting safety issues that—" "David!" Roger slammed his hand on the table. "Safety issues? All our projects have been approved by the competent authorities. There are no safety issues." "There are, Roger, and we know this because we were using materials below the ideal specifications to save costs." Roger fell silent for a moment, studying David with an expression that mixed disbelief and growing irritation. "David, explain something to me. Are you telling me that our company was deliberately using inadequate materials? I'm saying we discovered irregularities that need to be corrected. Irregularities discovered by whom? By that charity worker you installed in your condominium." David felt anger rise, but kept his voice calm. "Emma Santos is an educator with a master's degree from NYU who lost her job for refusing to collude with corruption. And yes, she was the one who opened my eyes to what was happening." Roger let out a humorless laugh. "David, you're telling me you're destroying a $200 million company because of the advice of a woman who was picking up trash on the street?" "I'm doing what I should have done years ago, taking responsibility for my actions." Roger stood up and began pacing the room, his heavy footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. "David, you've completely lost your sense of reality. You're acting like a rebellious teenager who just discovered social consciousness." "Roger, children may be at risk." What children, David? In 20 years of operation, has any child been harmed on our sites? Have we had any accidents? Any lawsuits for negligence? David hesitated. It was true that they had never had any serious incidents recorded. No, but nothing. Roger sat back down, now leaning forward in an attacking position. David, you're spending $15 million on preventive renovations based on the advice of a woman who has personal motives to want to destroy construction companies. What do you mean by that? David, have you investigated the past of this Emma Santos? Do you know why she really lost her job? David felt something cold run down his spine. I know. She refused to accept bribes from Whitestone. That's her version. But did you check the facts? Of course I checked. She showed me documents, evidence. Documents she could have forged, evidence she could have manipulated. Roger pulled a folder from his briefcase. David, I hired a private investigator to look into this woman's history. David felt the world start to spin around him. You did what? It was my obligation as an investor to protect our assets against possible fraud. Roger opened the folder and pulled out several sheets. Do you want to know what we discovered? David didn't want to know, but he nodded. Emma Santos was fired from St. Cecilia Academy, not for refusing bribes, but for financial irregularities. She was embezzling money from tuition fees for her own expenses. That's a lie, David said automatically, but his voice came out less convincing than he would have liked. Oh, really? Then explain to me why she never sued the school for wrongful termination. Explain to me why no other private school in New York wanted to hire her after she left St. Cecilia. David felt as if the ground was opening beneath his feet. Roger, that doesn't make sense. If she was stealing, why would she risk reporting Whitestone? Because it's the perfect revenge, David. She loses her job, her reputation, her financial stability, and then finds a way to destroy the companies she considers responsible for her downfall. Roger leaned even further forward. David, think coldly. A highly educated woman with a master's degree suddenly appears as a charity worker exactly in the area where you stroll with your daughter. Your daughter offers her a doll, creating an emotional bond. She has exactly the information you need to feel guilty. Doesn't that seem like too much of a coincidence? David felt nauseous. Everything Roger was saying made terrible and logical sense. And there's more, Roger continued relentlessly. Your late wife never volunteered at St. Cecilia Academy. She never funded scholarships for underprivileged children. We checked with all the charitable institutions in the city. That's impossible. I saw documents, photographs. Forged. Very well done, but false. David was trembling now. If Roger was telling the truth, everything he had based his decisions on for the past few months was an elaborate lie. Roger, why would Emma do this? What would be the ultimate goal? David, you've already transferred $15 million for renovations. You bought Robert's share for $25 million. You're planning to create an educational foundation worth $50 million. And who did you choose to run that foundation? David felt his blood run cold. Emma, exactly. David, you're falling victim to the most sophisticated con of your life. And the worst part is that she's using your own guilt and love for your daughter against you. At that moment, David's phone rang. It was an internal call from Carla. Mr. Johnson, Miss Emma is here. She said it's urgent. David looked at Roger, who smiled sardonically. How convenient. Why don't you let her in? I think it's time for some direct questions. David hesitated for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then, with a hoarse voice, he said, Carla, let Emma in. As they waited, Roger carefully organized the documents on David's desk. Remember, David, desperate people are capable of anything, and this woman was very desperate when you met. The door opened, and Emma entered with a smile that died on her lips when she saw the expressions on the faces of the two men. "Mr. David? Is something wrong?" David stared at her, trying to find signs of dishonesty on the face he had learned to trust. "Emma, please sit down. We need to talk." Continue 0152, chapter. And 9, The Truth Behind the Lies. Emma slowly sat in the chair David had indicated, her eyes nervously moving between him and Roger. She was wearing a simple blue dress that David had bought for her weeks ago when he realized she only had 2 outfits. Now, observing her under the harsh light of Roger's accusations, David wondered if even her modest appearance was part of a carefully crafted act. "Emma," David began, his voice sounding strangely formal to his own ears, "Mr. Roger Wilson, one of our company's investors, has brought some information about your past that I need to clarify." Emma looked at Roger, who was watching her with the cold satisfaction of a predator about to make the final strike. "What kind of information?" Roger leaned forward, spreading the documents on the desk so Emma could see them. "Miss Santos, or should I call you something else, because we've discovered that Emma Santos may not even be your real name." David saw Emma visibly pale, her hands trembling slightly as she looked at the papers. "My name is Emma Santos. Yes," she said in a low but firm voice. "Then can you explain these discrepancies in your story?" Roger pointed to one of the documents. "According to our records, you were fired from St. Cecilia Academy, not for ethical reasons, but for embezzling school funds." "That's a lie," Emma replied immediately, but David noticed her voice had lost its usual confidence. "A lie?" Roger smiled cynically. "Then why have you never sued the school for wrongful termination? Why did you accept to leave quietly if you were innocent?" Emma looked at David with growing desperation. "Mr. David, I can explain—" "Can you also explain why your late wife never volunteered at St. Cecilia?" Roger interrupted. "Because we checked with all the charitable institutions in the city, and Marina Johnson's name doesn't appear in any records." David felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Emma, is this true?" Emma closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, there were tears, but also a determination that David hadn't expected to see. "Mr. David, can I speak to you alone?" "Anything you have to say can be said in front of Mr. Roger," David replied coldly. Emma stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. Do you want the truth? Then you're going to get the whole truth." She stood up and walked to the window, watching the movement of Wall Street 40 floors below. When she turned back, her posture had changed. There was less vulnerability and more strength. "It's true that I was fired from St. Cecilia for embezzlement, but not in the way you think." Roger crossed his arms, clearly ready for more lies. David remained silent, waiting. Emma sat back down, looking directly at David. "I was using part of the tuition fees to pay for school supplies for children whose families couldn't afford all the costs." "That's still embezzlement," Roger pointed out. "I completely agree," Emma said, surprising both of them. "It was wrong. It was against the rules, and I knew that. But when you see a 6-year-old child being humiliated because they don't have the book that others do, or being excluded from an activity because their family couldn't pay for extra materials—" She paused, wiping away a tear. "I started small, $10, $20 here and there. Then it became larger amounts. In 2 years, I had embezzled about $15,000. $15,000, David repeated. "For school supplies, uniforms, educational trips for children whose families were facing temporary financial hardships. I kept detailed records of every penny, with photos of the children helped and thank you letters from the parents." Roger shook his head. "That doesn't change the fact that it was theft." "It doesn't," Emma agreed again. When they found out, I offered to pay back all the money. I had savings. I was willing to go into debt to reimburse the school. And why didn't you sue for wrongful termination? David asked. Emma smiled sadly. Because I was guilty, not of what they publicly claimed, that I was stealing for personal gain, but I was guilty of violating the institution's rules. David was confused. But then why did you present yourself as a victim of a corrupt system? Because that part is also true. Emma leaned forward. Mr. David, do you think it was a coincidence that I was discovered just when I refused to approve the Brooks Brothers project? She pulled out a folder from her bag that David hadn't seen before. For 2 years, the school administration knew about my charitable scheme. Some teachers and even administrators knew and turned a blind eye because they saw the positive results. So why were you fired right then? Because someone needed a way to silence me. Emma opened the folder and showed a series of printed emails. These are emails between the school's financial director and representatives from Brooks Brothers. They planned to use my irregular situation to blackmail me. David took the emails and read them quickly. His blood ran cold as he understood the implications. They wanted you to approve the project in exchange for keeping your situation a secret. Exactly. And when I refused, they fired me and spread only half the truth. That I was embezzling money. The part about helping underprivileged children was conveniently omitted. Roger was studying the emails with growing discomfort. That doesn't prove anything. Emma looked directly at him. Mr. Roger, may I ask you a question? How much did you pay to investigate my past? That's not relevant. It is, because I'm sure it was a lot of money to uncover only half the truth. Emma pulled another document from the folder. This is the complete report of the school's internal investigation. Note the date, 2 weeks after I refused to sign off on the Brooks Brothers project. David read the document and felt his worldview shift once again. The report clearly mentioned that Emma had used the resources for unauthorized charitable purposes and that several low-income families had benefited from her irregular actions. Emma, David said slowly, why didn't you show me this before? Because I knew you would think exactly what you are thinking now, that I am a criminal trying to redeem myself through good intentions. Emma stood up again. And because I was ashamed. Ashamed. Mr. David, your wife never actually worked at St. Cecilia Academy, but she worked at several other charitable institutions in the city. And when I found out who you were, I researched your family. I found records of her work, saw photos in newspapers from charity events. Emma paused, clearly struggling with her emotions. I made up the story about knowing her because I wanted you to understand that there are people who dedicate their lives to helping others. Because I was desperate for someone to believe that there are still good people in the world. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of traffic 40 stories below. David looked at Emma, trying to process everything he had heard. Roger nervously reviewed the documents he had brought. Emma, David finally said, you lied to me. I did, she agreed without hesitation, and manipulated my guilt about Sarah to convince me to help you. Yes. And used my daughter to create an emotional bond that would prevent me from thinking rationally about your motivations. Emma closed her eyes and nodded. Yes. David stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city stretching to the horizon. After a long moment, he turned to face her. Emma, do you have any idea how much this hurts me? I do, she replied with a broken voice, and I sincerely apologize. Then why did you do it? Emma looked at him with tear-filled eyes. Because, Mr. David, even with all my lies and manipulations, the at-risk children are real. The inadequate materials are real. and you are the only person I found in 2 years who was willing to do something to fix this." David studied her face for a long moment. Then, surprising both Emma and Roger, he began to smile. "You know what, Emma? I think I finally understand who you really are." Chapter 10. The Christmas that changed everything 1 year later, December 2025. The auditorium of the new Sarah Johnson Educational Foundation was filled with children, parents, educators, and representatives from the New York media. The glass walls of the modern building, located in Brooklyn, offered a panoramic view of the city and symbolized the transparency that David had chosen as a fundamental principle of the foundation. It was Christmas Eve 2025, exactly 1 year after the meeting that changed everything. David was backstage at the small stage set up in the auditorium, nervously adjusting his tie. At 43, he looked rejuvenated, his hair still grey, but his eyes had a liveliness they hadn't possessed in years. He wore a simple navy suit, very different from the designer clothes he used to wear in the past. "Dad, are you nervous?" Lily, now 8 years old, appeared at his side, wearing an emerald green dress she had chosen for the occasion. Her brown curls were held back with a golden ribbon, and she carried a small package carefully wrapped in gold paper. "A little princess, and you," Lily smiled, revealing that she had lost 2 more teeth since the beginning of the year. "No, I'm excited. Emma said today is a very special day." David looked through a crack in the curtain and spotted Emma in the audience, animatedly chatting with a group of children from the foundation's first class. She wore a simple royal blue dress and a gold chain around her neck, the same one she wore the day they met. But now he knew it was a gift from her late daughter, Bella. In the 12 months following the revelation at the library and the confrontation in the office, much had changed. After Emma admitted her manipulations, David faced the hardest decision of his life: to abandon the project or continue knowing he had been partially deceived. The answer came when he personally visited the 6 projects his company had completed with white stone. He saw with his own eyes the premature cracks in the walls of the Rainbow Daycare, smelled the mold in the Santos Dumont Technical School indicating ventilation issues, and observed the makeshift electrical installations at the Hope Community Center. Emma's lies about knowing Sarah had been motivated by desperation, but the safety issues were absolutely real. "Mr. David?" Carla's voice brought him back to the present. His assistant, who had decided to accompany him when he sold Johnson Realty, approached with a tablet in hand. "It's time. Everyone is waiting." David took a deep breath, took Lily's hand, and walked toward the stage. The auditorium erupted in applause as they appeared. 200 people representing the new direction his life had taken. In the front row, he saw Ms. Patricia sitting next to her husband and their 2 teenage children. His sister had been surprisingly supportive throughout the entire transformation process, even helping to raise funds for the foundation among her high society acquaintances. Next to her was Robert, who had decided to come out of early retirement to work as the foundation's project director, personally overseeing each renovation. "Good evening," David said into the microphone, his voice echoing through the auditorium. "Exactly 1 year ago, my daughter Lily did something that changed our lives forever. She offered her favorite doll to a stranger." He paused, finding Emma among the children. She was smiling and crying at the same time. That stranger was named Emma Santos, and she taught me that sometimes people do wrong things for the right reasons. She lied to me, manipulated me, used my guilt and my pain to get what she wanted. David paused again as murmurs spread through the audience. But what she wanted was justice for children she didn't even know. Lily tugged at her father's jacket sleeve. It was the signal they had agreed upon. David bent down so she could speak into the microphone. "My name is Lily Johnson, and I want to tell you about my new family." The audience laughed affectionately as Lily, with the typical spontaneity of children, began narrating her version of the events of the past year. Last year I gave my American Girl doll to Emma because my mommy always said that the best gifts come from the heart. And then Dad found out that Emma was very smart and that some bad people were building dangerous schools for children. David smiled, watching how Lily had perfectly simplified the complexity of everything they had lived through. Then Dad got very mad at the bad men and decided to fix all the schools. And Emma came to live near us, and now she teaches me songs every night. Lily paused, dramatically, clearly savoring the attention of the entire audience. And you know what else? Today, Dad is going to ask Emma to be my new mommy. The auditorium erupted in exclamations of surprise. David felt his face heat up as he watched Emma look visibly shocked among the children. He hadn't planned for Lily to reveal this publicly, but his daughter had decided that this was the perfect moment. "Lily," he whispered, trying to regain control of the situation, but she had already pulled the golden package from her little bag. "Emma, come here!" Lily shouted into the microphone. Emma slowly walked to the stage, clearly unsure of what to do with the sudden attention of 200 people. When she reached David and Lily's side, she looked at him with a mix of surprise and emotion. "Mr. David, Emma," David interrupted, taking the microphone again. "A year ago you told me that sometimes doing the right thing comes at a very high price. You were right. It cost me a company, some friends, a lot of money, and several sleepless nights." He paused, looking at Lily, who held the golden package with anticipation. "But it also gave me something I hadn't had in years, a purpose that goes beyond profit, a daughter who understands the value of generosity and—" David hesitated, then smiled. "And a woman who taught me that it is possible to rebuild a life on honest foundations." Emma was openly crying now. "David!" Lily couldn't hold back anymore and pushed the golden package into Emma's hands. "Open it! Open it!" With trembling hands, Emma unwrapped the package and revealed a small blue velvet box. When she opened it, she discovered a simple white gold ring with a solitaire diamond. "Emma Johnson," David said, kneeling on the stage in front of 200 people, "will you marry me, not for the man I was, but for the man I have become thanks to you?" The silence in the auditorium was complete. Emma looked at the ring, then at David kneeling, then at Lily clapping excitedly, and finally at the 200 people waiting for her response. "David," she finally said, her voice amplified by the microphone he still held, "I have made many mistakes. I lied, manipulated, used your pain against you, and saved thousands of children in the process," David interrupted. "Emma, I am not asking for the perfect woman to marry me. I am asking for the woman who made me a better person." Emma looked at Lily, who whispered loudly enough for the microphone to catch. "Say yes, Emma, then you can live with us forever." Emma laughed through her tears, extended her left hand and said, "Yes." The auditorium erupted in applause and cheers of joy. David stood up, placed the ring on Emma's finger, and kissed her while Lily danced around them, shouting, "I'm getting a new mommy!" When they separated, David took the microphone again. "Friends, the Sarah Johnson Educational Foundation is not just an educational project. It is proof that imperfect people can create perfect things when they dedicate themselves to causes greater than themselves." He looked at Emma, who was holding Lily's hand. "In the past year, we renovated 6 schools, implemented new safety standards in dozens of projects, created scholarships for 300 underprivileged children, and most importantly, we proved that it is possible to succeed without compromising integrity." David paused, observing the smiling faces in the audience, some of whom were children whose lives had been directly impacted by the Foundation's work. Sarah left me a letter 4 years ago saying that she hoped I would one day discover that true wealth is not in what we accumulate, but in what we give away. It took me time, but I finally understood. He embraced Emma and Lily, looking at the audience that continued to applaud. Thank you so much for being part of this journey, and Merry Christmas to all families, including those formed in unexpected ways. As they descended from the stage, Lily tugged on Emma's hand and whispered, "Emma, can you sing that Christmas carol for me every year?" Emma knelt to be at the girl's height. "Which carol, dear?" "The one you were singing the day we met, the one about baby Jesus being born in Florida." Emma smiled, recognizing the song that had created the first bond between them. "Of course, my love. Every Christmas until you grow up and have your own children to sing to, and then I'll teach it to them too. Absolutely. That way the song will pass from family to family, always reminding people that the best things in life don't cost money." David watched the interaction between the two most important people in his life and realized he had found something that no amount of money could buy: a family built on genuine love, mutual forgiveness, and shared purpose. Outside the auditorium, the Christmas lights of New York began to twinkle, marking the start of another Christmas Eve. But this time, for David, Lily, and Emma, it would be the first of many Christmases they would spend together, celebrating not only the birth of Christ, but the rebirth of their own lives. Ms. Patricia approached them as they exited the auditorium. "David," she said, hugging her brother, "Sarah would be proud." "She really would," he agreed, looking at Emma, who was animatedly talking to some of the children benefiting from the foundation. "It took me a while to understand, but she was right. Life only makes sense when we share it with those who truly matter." Lily tugged at the hands of the three adults. "Can we go home? I want to show Emma where she will put her clothes in our room." David and Emma laughed. "Lily, Emma will have her own room." "Why? Aren't you going to sleep together like married parents?" Emma blushed intensely while David and Patricia tried to hide their laughter. "We'll talk about that after the wedding, Princess," David said diplomatically. As they walked through the streets of Central Park towards the parking lot, they observed other families heading to their Christmas celebrations. David thought about how his life had completely changed in just 12 months, from a wealthy, emotionally distant businessman to the director of an educational foundation, from a lonely widower to a passionate fiancé, from a protective but cold father to a man who had rediscovered the meaning of fatherhood through the eyes of his daughter. "David," Emma said when they reached the car, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course. When did you really decide you wanted to marry me?" "Today on stage, when Lily talked about the ring." David laughed, opening the car door for her. "Actually, I decided 6 months ago when I saw you teaching Lily how to plant tree saplings in the Foundation's garden. You two were dirty with soil, laughing like children, completely happy doing something that cost $0 but was worth millions. And why didn't you ask sooner?" "Because I wanted to wait for the perfect moment, and I realize now that Lily was right. Today was the perfect moment." Lily, who had been listening from the back seat, chimed in. "I knew it. Kids always know when adults are in love." As David drove through the illuminated streets of New York, he reflected on the irony of the situation. He had started that journey trying to protect Lily from outside influences he deemed inappropriate, only to discover that his daughter possessed an intuitive wisdom about human relationships that he had lost over the years. The Sarah Johnson Educational Foundation had served over 1,000 children in its first year of operation. David had lost. Emma had invested about 60% of her personal fortune in the process of correcting the inadequate works and creating the foundation. But she discovered that waking up every day with a purpose greater than profit was worth more than any material wealth. Emma had found not only a new family, but also a way to honor Bella's memory through her work with other children. Her guilt for lying to David had transformed into a determination to always be transparent in every aspect of their new life together. And Lily had gained not only a new mother, but also a life lesson about how simple acts of kindness can create waves of change that spread far beyond what we can imagine. When they arrived home, a smaller apartment that David had purchased in the same neighborhood, more suitable for a simple family life, Lily rushed to her room to prepare a surprise while David and Emma sat in the living room. "Emma," David said, taking her hand, "are you sure you want this life? I know it's very different from what you imagined when you were a school principal." Emma smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "David, 2 years ago I was collecting recyclable materials to survive. A year ago I was lying to get help. Today I'm engaged to the man I love and going to be the stepmother of the most wonderful child I've ever met. If that's not a Christmas miracle, I don't know what is." Lily reappeared, carrying the American Girl doll she had given to Emma on their first meeting, now carefully restored and wearing a small, handmade wedding dress. "Look, the doll is dressed for your wedding, and I made a surprise." She turned the doll around and showed that she had embroidered on the miniature dress the words, "To Emma who taught me that family is who we choose to love, Lily." Emma took the doll with tears in her eyes. "Lily, it's perfect. I will cherish it forever. And when you have babies, you can let them play with it." David and Emma exchanged glances, both thinking the same thing. After so much suffering and loss, perhaps there were even more joys waiting for them in the future. Outside, the bells of the nearby church began to chime midnight, officially announcing Christmas 2025. David embraced Emma and Lily, watching through the window, the city lights stretching as far as the eye could see. Exactly 2 years earlier, Sarah had written in her letter that she hoped David would discover that true wealth lies in what we give, not in what we accumulate. At that moment, embracing his new family while the bells rang and Lily hummed the Christmas carol Emma had taught her, David finally fully understood what his wife had been trying to tell him. He had lost a business, a fortune, and several superficial friendships, but he had gained a purpose, a clear conscience, and a family united by authentic values rather than social convenience. As Lily fell asleep, between them on the sofa, still holding the doll in the wedding dress, David whispered to Emma, "Thank you for saving our family." Emma gently kissed his forehead. "Thank you for allowing me to be a part of it." And as New York slept outside, preparing to wake up on Christmas 2025, inside that simple yet love-filled apartment, 3 people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances continued to write a story that proved that real miracles happen not through magic, but through the courage of imperfect people who decide to make perfect choices.